On a peaceful morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the calm was suddenly shattered when a wild bobcat appeared in the backyard of a family home. The homeowner stood frozen in shock as the bobcat faced the family dog, only a few meters apart, in a space that had never belonged to the wild. There was no fierce growling and no sudden attack, only a breath-holding tension between two very different worlds. But what kept everyone watching was the way the dog neither ran away nor lunged forward, instead seeming to silently guard the unexpected visitor. Why didn't this dangerous encounter turn into a tragedy? And could that unusual calm have unintentionally saved the life of a frightened, lost bobcat? What happened next may change the way you see the fragile boundary between wildlife and domestic animals. Before we begin this rare and remarkable story, please like the video if you enjoy extraordinary moments from the animal world. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more true and moving stories. And don't forget to turn on notifications to join us on many surprising journeys ahead. The forest was gone, but the fear in its eyes remained. A young bobcat, barely more than a kitten, roamed the desolate, fire-ravaged woods. Its fur was singed, a leg dragged uselessly, and hunger gnawed at its tiny frame. It hid among the ruins of an abandoned settlement, every shadow a potential predator. The world was a cruel, silent echo of the inferno that had claimed everything it knew. The air was still acrid, a metallic tang that coated Bobcat's tongue. Every breath was a rasp, every movement a fresh stab of pain through his mangled leg. He was just a flicker of ginger and ash against the backdrop of skeletal trees and charcoal-dusted earth. His whiskers, once sensitive antennae, were brittle and singed, offering little guidance in this alien landscape. The scent of fear was constant, his own. He was alone, so utterly alone, a hollow ache in his small chest. The instinct to hunt, once a playful thrill, was now a gnawing desperation. His stomach was a tight knot of emptiness, the last warmth of his mother's milk a distant, fading memory. His ribs, once hidden beneath a fluffy coat, were stark ridges under his soot-stained skin. The world outside the den had been a place of dappled sunlight and the rustle of prey, but that world had burned. This one offered only silence and the phantom heat of the fire that had taken everything. A new scent, thick and cloying, reached him. Human. He knew that smell. It was the smell of the fire, too, somehow, of destruction. He flattened himself against the cold, dead earth, trying to disappear. His heart hammered a frantic drum against his thin ribs. The ground vibrated, a heavy thudding that spoke of giants. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could become invisible, wishing his pain would just vanish, wishing for the comforting scent of his mother. Then a shadow fell over him, bigger than any hawk, more imposing than any deer. He opened his eyes just a crack. A huge blurred shape loomed dark against the pallid sky. No, not a shape. A hand, a huge gloved hand, moving slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking its prey. He snarled, a tiny, reedy sound, all the courage he could muster in his emaciated frame. He lashed out with a good paw, his claws, though small, still sharp. A sharp prick, then a wave of drowsy warmth washed over him. The world tilted, the scent of human intensified, and then darkness. He woke to a different kind of darkness, not the oppressive gloom of the burned forest, but a confined, oddly soft space. The smell was clean, sterile, unfamiliar. His injured leg throbbed, but the sharp stabbing pain had dulled to a persistent ache. There was a gentle vibration, a rumbling beneath him. Panic, swift and cold, gripped him. He was trapped. He tried to scramble, but his legs were weak, his body heavy. A crack of light, then a giant face peered in. It was a human face, but different from the indistinct blur of the forest. This one was close, its eyes large and brown. Not menacing, but curious, he hissed, a weak, pathetic sound. The giant made soft, murmuring noises, sounds that meant nothing but still held a strange lack of threat. Then a hand, gloved again, reached in. He flinched, shrinking back, but the hand didn't grab. It just placed a small, shallow dish in front of him. The scent hit him instantly. Meat. Rich, savory, irresistible. Hunger, primal and insistent, warred with his fear. He hadn't eaten real meat in days. He watched the hand retreat, then slowly, cautiously, he approached the dish. His nose twitched. It smelled real. He took a tentative lick. The taste was incredible, a burst of energy he hadn't realized he was missing. He devoured it, forgetting his fear for a moment, tearing at the soft, warm food until the dish was clean. The ache in his stomach began to subside, replaced by a dull warmth. More gentle prodding followed. Another prick, a sting that made him yelp, but this time the drowsy warmth was different. It didn't feel like falling into darkness. It felt like healing. He was lifted gently onto a soft, warm surface. Blankets. He remembered blankets from some distant, half-forgotten dream of his mother's den. Before the fire, he curled into the warmth, the soft fabric a comforting pressure against his aching body. The pain in his leg was a dull hum now, rather than a sharp cry. He felt a huge hand gently stroke his back once, then twice. He tensed, ready to bolt, but the hand was soft, slow, without malice. It was just touch, a strange, unfamiliar comfort. Days bled into a blur of similar sensations. Food, always available, always delicious. Water, clear and fresh, never tasting of ash. The smell of clean, soft blankets. The giants continued to loom, but their movements were slow, their voices soft, never harsh. His leg was checked, cleaned, rebandaged. The pain receded further with each passing hour, replaced by a tingling sensation of new skin growing, of muscles slowly regaining strength. He began to associate the giants with the absence of pain, with the warmth, with the food. One giant, a female with a kind, soft voice, spent the most time with him. She would sit just outside his enclosure, talking softly, not to him directly, but to the air around him. He began to understand the rhythm of her voice, the gentle rise and fall. He would watch her, his fear slowly replaced by a cautious curiosity. He noticed the way her lips curved upwards when he ate, the soft crinkle around her eyes. He had known only the stark reality of survival, but she offered something different, care. And with that care, a fragile tendril of trust began to unfurl in his small, wild heart. The world was no longer just ashes and fear. It was also soft blankets and gentle hands. While one fought for life, another grieved for a life lost. Could two broken souls ever connect? Miles away in a quiet town, Rex, an old shepherd, stared blankly at the charred forest. The smell, even from this distance, was an acrid whisper of destruction, a memory of something vibrant now gone. It mirrored the emptiness inside him, a cavernous ache where a warm, furry presence used to be. Buster, his best friend, another dog, had recently succumbed to an illness, a slow fade that Rex had watched with a helplessness that still gnawed at him. Now the world felt muted, colors leached away, sounds distant. He refused to eat, the bowl of kibble, once a source of boundless joy. Now just an uninteresting pile of hard, dry bits. His once lively eyes, the color of rich earth, now mirrored the desolation of the burned landscape, hollow and vacant. Dr. Emily, a retired veterinarian and Rex's owner, knelt beside him, her voice a soft murmur against the wind that carried the faint scent of ash. She stroked his thick, silver-dusted fur, a gesture that usually brought a sigh of contentment from him, but today he remained rigid, unyielding. He could feel the warmth of her hand, the gentle pressure, but it was just a sensation, not a comfort. His focus remained on the skeletal trees, a stark reminder of how quickly everything could disappear. He remembered Buster's last days, the rasping breaths, the way his familiar scent had slowly altered, becoming something foreign and terrifying. The house felt too big now, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of leaves outside, seemed to amplify the absence. Bobcat, still raw from the trauma of the fire and the bewildering speed of his capture, was a knot of terrified instinct. The strange hands, the overwhelming smells of antiseptic, and fear were a fresh nightmare. He remembered the searing heat, the smoke that clawed at his lungs, the desperate dash through crackling undergrowth. Then came the strange net, the crushing sensation, and the prick that made his limb go numb. Now he lay on a cold, hard surface, his injured leg throbbing, bandaged tightly. He tried to pull away, to hide in the shadows that weren't there, but the pain was too much. He saw a giant, a human, lean over him, their voice a low rumble. He didn't understand the sounds, but the movements were slow, deliberate. He braced himself for another jab, another prod, but instead, a soft cloth dabbed at a wound on his shoulder. It stung at first, a sharp, cold burn, then a curious coolness spread, easing the fiery ache. Another giant approached, holding a terrifying silver glint. Bobcat flinched, instincts screaming for him to lash out, to defend. He was so tired, though, so weak. He felt a sharp, sudden sting, a quick, intense jab in his flank. His body tensed, anticipating more pain, but it quickly faded into a strange, heavy lethargy. The giant's touch was firm but surprisingly gentle as they rearranged him, settling him onto something soft. It was a blanket, he realized, smelling faintly of clean chemicals, but also of something warm and comforting. The rough texture against his fur was a strange relief after the cold, hard table. He felt himself sinking, the world blurring at the edges. He woke slowly, the fog in his mind lifting by degrees. The throbbing in his leg was still there, a dull ache now instead of a searing pain. He was in a confined space, a cage of some sort, but it was padded with a soft blanket. He stretched, testing his bandaged limb, a low groan escaping his throat. It was different here. Not the forest, not the fire, but it wasn't the relentless danger either. He still felt wary, every muscle coiled, but the immediate threat seemed to have receded. A new scent reached him, something earthy and warm, not unpleasant. He watched the barred opening, waiting. Meanwhile, Rex continued his vigil by the window, a silent statue of grief. The charred trees seemed to mock him, mirroring the burnt-out landscape of his own heart. He heard Emily's soft pleas, the gentle rattle of his favorite chew toy, but they were sounds without meaning. Buster was gone. The simple fact was a heavy stone in his chest, pressing down, making it hard to breathe. He remembered Buster's goofy grin, the way he'd nudge him with his nose for attention, the shared chases after squirrels in the yard. Now the yard was just a yard, the squirrels just fleeting blurs, and the silence where Buster's playful bark should be was deafening. He closed his eyes, wishing for the familiar weight of Buster's head against his, but only the empty air remained. Suddenly, a giant appeared at the opening of Bobcat's cage. This time there was no net, no needle, just a hand, moving slowly, deliberately. The giant spoke, a soft, coaxing sound, and then placed something on a small dish. Meat. The smell hit Bobcat like a jolt, primal and undeniable. Raw, fresh meat. He hadn't eaten anything substantial since before the fire days ago. His stomach growled, a deep, rumbling protest. He eyed the giant, then the meat. Suspicion warred with overwhelming hunger. The giant remained still, unthreatening. Slowly, cautiously, Bobcat stretched a paw, then his nose towards the dish. The first bite was tentative, a wild instinct overriding his fear. It tasted like life, like survival. And as he ate, a sliver of the ice around his heart began to melt, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar warmth. The giants, it seemed, were not all bad. The air still tasted of ash and burned pine, a bitter reminder of the inferno that had reshaped his world. Bobcat, a creature once of fluid grace and silent predation, now moved with a halting, excruciating gait. His right hind leg, a tangled mess of muscle and bone, protested every shift of weight, sending jolts of white-hot agony through him. Hunger, a gnawing, relentless beast, drove him forward not towards the usual robust prey, but toward the scuttling movement beneath a charred log. A mouse, pathetic, but a mouse was life, and life, even in this scorched wasteland, was precious. He hunched, gathering his remaining strength, his tail twitching erratically, a testament to his shattered focus. The jump was a clumsy lunge, not the explosive spring he was known for. He missed. The mouse, a tiny brown blur, vanished into the char. A low, frustrated growl rumbled in his chest, cut short by a fresh wave of pain from his leg. A new scent, unfamiliar and unsettling, drifted on the sparse breeze. Human. And dog. He froze, muscles tensing, forgetting the mouse, forgetting the hunger for a split second. Fear, cold and primal, gripped him. Humans meant danger, meant traps, meant pain. The dog, however, was different. Its scent was warm, not aggressive, and now a soft sound, a low, drawn-out whine, reached his ears. It wasn't the challenging bark of a territorial canine, nor the predatory growl of a hunter. It was soft, puzzling. Bobcat instinctively tried to retreat, to melt back into the shadows of the scorched trees. But his injured leg betrayed him. He took one frantic step, then another, a sharp crack echoing from his leg as he twisted. He collapsed, a whimper escaping his throat, his body trembling, not just from pain, but from the raw vulnerability of his situation. The world swam. The metallic tang of his own fear mixed with the acrid smell of burning. He lay there, muscles screaming, his breath ragged. Two giants now loomed over him. The female giant, Emily, had a voice that was low and soothing, not the harsh shouts he'd heard from other humans. She knelt impossibly close, a large hand, gloved and hesitant, reaching towards him. Panic flared. He tried to scramble away again, a futile thrashing of his uninjured limbs, but the pain in his leg was a monstrous anchor, holding him fast. He snarled, a weak, pathetic sound compared to his usual territorial warnings, baring teeth that felt suddenly blunt and useless. The giant paused, then her hand slowly, carefully placed something soft and dark over his head. Darkness, confusion. The world spun into oblivion. The last sensation, a sharp sting in his flank, followed by a strange, sudden warmth spreading through his veins. He awoke to unfamiliar surroundings, a soft, strange material beneath him, not the rough earth. The air was cool, clean, devoid of ash. He tried to move, but a dull ache in his leg was still there, though less searing than before. A low rhythmic thumping filled the space. A heart, not his own but close, and a new scent, not threatening but comforting. He opened his eyes slowly. The light was gentle, diffused, bars. He was in a cage. Fear, cold and insidious, tightened around his chest, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of exhaustion. He saw the giants again, moving in the periphery, their movements purposeful. One of them, the female, approached his enclosure. She spoke in those soft tones again, and a bowl, gleaming with fresh, clear water, was pushed gently towards him. He was thirsty, achingly so. The water tasted like salvation, cool and clean, washing away the lingering metallic taste of fear. Days blurred into a haze of pain and relief. The initial terror of the giants slowly gave way to a strange, nascent trust. Their hands, though huge, were gentle. The sting of needles was always followed by warmth or by the dulling of pain. Food, soft and nourishing, appeared regularly, and his hunger, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, was satisfied. The strange giant, Rex the German Shepherd, often lay outside his enclosure, a soft, reassuring presence. Their eyes met sometimes, the dog's brown and deep, devoid of threat, full of something he couldn't quite name. He began to associate the giants not with danger, but with comfort, with the slow, steady easing of his suffering. His leg, though still healing, no longer screamed with every movement. A deep, instinctual peace, unfamiliar but welcome, began to settle in his weary bones. He would survive. He would heal. The world was a blur of frantic scents and a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds. Bobcat, the wildcat, a creature of shadow and silence, found himself trapped, the dense underbrush replaced by hard, unforgiving surfaces. A dull ache throbbed in his left flank, a constant reminder of the metallic clang that had brought his world crashing down. fear, cold and sharp, was a familiar companion. But this was different, a primal terror of the unknown, of the giant upright beings whose presence now loomed so oppressively. He could smell another animal, a large one, a canine, but its scent was oddly soft. He snarled, a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through his ribs, a defiance born of instinct and pain. His teeth, though small for a predator of his size, were still sharp, still capable. He would fight, even if his legs felt like jelly, even if the strange, sweet, metallic tang of the dart still clung to the back of his throat. He pushed himself further into the corner, his injured leg throbbing with every movement, a painful reminder of his vulnerability. The large canine, Rex the dog, moved, a slow, deliberate shuffle that seemed almost hesitant. Rex lay down, a soft thud against the unfamiliar floor. His body loaded the ground, a clear sign of submission. A tail, bushy and golden, wagged slowly, a gentle rhythmic thump that was utterly at odds with the frantic rhythm of Bobcat's own heart. This was new. This was confusing. Predators didn't do that. Then came another giant. This one, Dr. Emily, moved with a different kind of quiet. Her scent was less overwhelming, tinged with antiseptic, but also something else, something warm and earthy. She moved slowly, her movements deliberate, not threatening. Bobcat watched, every muscle coiled, ready to spring, even though his body screamed in protest. Her hands, large and pale, carefully placed something on the floor. Then she retreated, backing away slowly, creating space. A primal part of Bobcat's brain registered the retreat as non-hostile, a rare gesture from these imposing figures. The offering. The smell hit him first, rich, meaty, deeply enticing. It cut through the fear, a primal tug at his empty stomach. Days of hunger had gnawed at him, a constant ache that had dulled even his hunting instincts. Now this aroma, so potent, so immediate, demanded his attention. He watched it, his amber eyes still sharp with suspicion, darting from the food to Dr. Emily, then to Rex the dog, who remained motionless, observing from a distance. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. His stomach growled, a low, embarrassing rumble that even he could hear. It was a betrayal of his wildness, a raw admission of his need. Slowly, carefully, Bobcat shifted. His injured leg protested, a sharp stab of pain, but the hunger was a stronger master. He moved, a low, slinking crawl, his body hugging the ground. Every muscle was tense, every nerve on edge. He reached the dish, his nose twitching, verifying the smell. It was real. It was sustenance. He plunged his face into the food, ravenously devouring the shredded chicken and wet cat food. The taste a burst of pure, unadulterated relief. Each bite was a small victory against the gnawing emptiness, a momentary forgetfulness of the pain. But even as he ate, his senses remained on high alert. His ears swiveled, listening. His eyes flickered, constantly scanning for threats. The memory of the trap, the sharp pain, the terror of capture. It was all too fresh, too raw. Dr. Emily remained still, a statue of quiet observation. Rex the dog continued to lie there, his slow tail wagged the only movement. Bobcat finished the last morsel, then licked the dish clean, a thoroughness born of long-held scarcity. He lifted his head, a sheen of wetness around his muzzle, and met Dr. Emily's gaze. There was no warmth in his eyes, no gratitude, only the deep-seated suspicion of a wild creature who had learned that comfort often came with a price. He was full for now. The pain in his legs still throbbed, but it felt less acute, muted by the warmth spreading through his belly. This was the first step, a fragile connection, forged not in trust, but in the most basic of needs: survival. Dr. Emily offered no gesture of comfort, no soft words. She understood. This was not about making friends. It was about healing, about rehabilitation, about slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding a future for a creature whose world had been shattered. And Bobcat, wildcat, survivor, understood only one thing. He had been fed. He was still alive. And for now, that was enough. The path to freedom, to the familiar sense of the forest, still stretched long and uncertain. But for the first time in days, the gnawing hunger had been silenced. A small victory, yes, but a victory nonetheless. The world tilted, then slammed shut. A metallic clang echoed, vibrant and terrifying through the narrow space. Bobcat the wildcat, adrenaline coursing, threw himself against the unseen barrier, a frantic, desperate scramble of claws and teeth. The scent of human, strong and cloying, pressed in from all sides, a primal alarm blaring in his mind. This was it, the instant. Every instinct screamed danger, every muscle tense for a fight he couldn't win. He snarled, low, guttural rumble that vibrated in his chest, a desperate warning to the giants who had engineered this prison. Pain, a dull throb in his leg, flared into a searing agony with each frantic movement. He remembered the sharp, sweet smell of the bait, the momentary lapse in caution, and the sudden jarring snap that had stolen his freedom. Now, darkness, punctuated by the unsettling sway of movement, was all that encompassed his universe. The scent of the other creature, the soft, housebound giant with the wet nose, faded, replaced by the overwhelming presence of heartwarming. The world stopped its terrifying sway. A new cacophony assaulted his senses, unfamiliar scents, high-pitched whirs, the muffled thud of footsteps. He was no longer in the comforting, if dangerous, open air. Here the air was thick with the strange antiseptic smell that clung to the giants and the metallic tang of fear. The cage was set down with a jarring jolt. Shadows flickered and shifted as giants moved around him, their massive forms looming. He pressed himself into the furthest corner, a tight ball of coiled fury and terror, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Each faint touch of air on his fur felt like an invasion, each distant sound a threat. He was a wild thing, made for the forest's whisper and the hunt's silence, not this echoing, scent-saturated prison. He launched himself at the approaching shadows, a blur of teeth and claws, the snarl ripping from his throat. The giants recoiled, their low murmurs a confusing stream of sounds. He wanted only to escape, to run, to vanish back into the shadowed safety of the trees. The pain in his leg, however, was a constant, gnawing reminder of his vulnerability, a weakness he had never known before. Then came the new fear, the needle, a sharp, unexpected sting in his muscle, quick and invasive. He arched his back, a wild, desperate buck. But the giants were strong, too many. A strange warmth began to spread through his body, softening the edges of his fury, dulling the sharp points of his fear. His limbs felt heavy, his eyelids drooped, and the world began to blur. He fought it, instinctively clawing at the encroaching darkness. But it pulled him down, a relentless, gentle tide. The throbbing in his leg for the first time began to recede, replaced by a soothing numbness. The giants' voices, though still a jumble of sounds, seemed less threatening now, like distant murmurs in a half-dream. He felt himself being lifted, his body strangely pliant, and then a different sensation, soft, warm, enfolding. A blanket. The unfamiliar comfort was confusing, unsettling, yet deeply soothing. He awoke to a different kind of world. The pain in his leg was still there, a dull ache now, but strangely muted. He stretched tentatively, testing the limits of his body. The giants were still here, but they moved differently now with a soft patience. One of them, the one with the gentle voice, approached cautiously. She placed a bowl near him. The smell was rich, meaty, intoxicating. He hadn't realized how truly hungry he was until that moment. He devoured it, not looking up, the taste of clean, cool water following, washing away the dusty dryness in his throat. It was strange, this new world where food appeared and thirst was quenched without a hunt. He still watched them, every movement, every shift of their giant bodies. His wild heart demanded caution, demanded suspicion. But a small, unfamiliar part of him noted the soft murmurs, the absence of threat. His leg, the giants touched it. He instinctively recoiled, a low growl rumbling in his throat, but the pain was distant, softened. Their touch, surprisingly, was gentle, firm, not violent. He saw the wound, cleaned and bound, a strange sterile covering over the raw flesh. He still hated the closeness, the invasion of his space, but the familiar agony of his injury was being replaced by a strange, comforting dullness. They were doing something, these giants, something that quieted the constant ache. He watched them, unblinking, as they moved around him, their intentions still a mystery. He was a creature of instinct, of freedom, and this confinement chafed. Yet the small, quiet part of him, the part that was healing, recognized the absence of malice, the presence of care. Surgery, the soft-voiced giant had said, a strange word, but the steady gaze, the gentle touch conveyed a promise. A promise of something beyond this cage, beyond this pain, a return to the wild perhaps, a return to himself. The world was a blur of overwhelming smells and the looming shadows of giants. One moment, the sharp, tearing agony in his leg had been the only reality. Then came the terrifying enclosure, the prick of a needle, and the sweet, dizzying surrender to oblivion. Waking was a slow, painful crawl back to awareness, his body screaming with a dull, persistent ache, but different. The gnawing emptiness in his belly was gone, replaced by a strange warmth. The parched dryness in his throat had vanished. He was confined, yes, but the confinement was soft, clean, and oddly safe. The giants at first were terrifying. Their movements were abrupt, their voices rumbling thunder. He would snarl, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through his injured paw, a primal warning to stay away. But they didn't. Instead, gentle hands encased in thick coverings would offer water that tasted cool and clean. Unlike the murky puddles he'd licked in desperation, food appeared, a delicious, meaty smell that overcame his fear. He ate, not with the frantic desperation of hunger, but with a cautious satisfaction. The pain in his leg, though ever present, was dulled, a constant throb rather than a searing fire. Then came the other one, not a giant, but a presence that lingered just beyond the wire mesh of his enclosure. At first, it was just another smell, an intruder. He'd flattened his ears, a low growl rumbling in his chest, prepared to defend his small territory. But the smell persisted, accompanied by a soft, almost imperceptible sound. A whimper, a gentle thud, as if something settled down. It was Rex. Dr. Emily, with a quiet confidence that always seemed to calm the frantic energy in the room, had permitted it. Rex, with his warm, earthy scent and silent presence, became a constant guardian. He would lie there just outside the enclosure, a large golden shape, occasionally letting out that soft whimper, a sound like a question. Sometimes his tail would give a slow, gentle wag, a soft thumping against the floor that was barely audible. The Bobcat, despite himself, found his growls subsiding whenever Rex was near. The pure, undiluted fear that had been his constant companion began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He would watch Rex, the way the dog's chest rose and fell with steady breaths, the peaceful, closed eyes. It was an unfamiliar calm, a quiet understanding that didn't demand anything of him. The vet team moved around them, preparing for the daunting surgery. He could sense their focused energy, the hushed conversations, the clinking of instruments. The pain in his leg was a constant reminder of what was to come. But now, a new sensation mingled with it, a fragile stir of hope, a whisper of trust. Dr. Emily, her gentle voice a soft murmur, spent long moments by his enclosure, her eyes assessing, her hands sketching in a notebook. He heard fragments of their discussions. Anesthetic approach, minimize stress, will to live. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent behind them. They wanted him to heal. They wanted him to live. And strangely, with the quiet presence of the golden giant outside his cage, a faint, fragile warmth began to bloom in his wild heart. A readiness to face the sharp bite of the next needle, the next gentle touch. He was, for the first time in a very long time, not entirely alone. The world had become a blurry, painful hum. Bobcat, the wildcat, felt a fire building in his bones, a new kind of searing heat that wasn't the sun on his fur or the rush of the hunt. It was an internal inferno, consuming him from the inside out, making his muscles twitch and his breath come in ragged gasps. The scent of antiseptic, so prevalent in this strange, confining den, now seemed to mock him, promising healing but delivering only this escalating agony. The giant, Dr. Emily, loomed over him, her soft voice a distant echo against the roar in his ears. He could feel her touch, gentle but firm, and a fresh wave of panic tightened his chest. A sharp, stinging sensation, then nothing. Then a new kind of throb deep in his side where the pain had been before. He was tired, so terribly tired, and yet the fire wouldn't let him rest. Every breath was a struggle, every muscle quivering with an unseen tremor. He wanted to lash out, to bite, to escape this overwhelming invasion. But his body was too weak, his will fractured by the relentless heat. The human giant, Emily, her face a blur of concern, moved with frantic urgency. Her hands, usually so soothing when they offered water or a soft blanket, now felt like a fresh threat. He snarled, a weak, raspy sound, batting at the needle she held, a thin glint of silver in the overwhelming brightness. He knew that sting. He knew that immediate invasion. No, not again. His instincts screamed at him to resist, to flee, to protect himself from this new onslaught. He thrashed weakly, his injured leg throbbing with the sudden movement, his body a trembling mass of raw nerves and fever-induced terror. The fire was roaring now, blurring the edges of his vision, making the world spin. He just wanted it to stop. He just wanted to be left alone to burn or to fade. Then a new presence, a warm bulk pressed against Emily's leg, a familiar scent, not wild, but not human either. The dog, Rex. The large, golden fur of the giant dog brushed against him. Bobcat flattened his ears, a low growl rumbling in his throat, a warning. But Rex didn't back away. Instead, he nudged Emily's hand, gently but insistently, his breath a warm puff against her arm. A low sound, a guttural rumble, escaped Rex's chest. It wasn't a threat. It was something else, something deep and primal, yet strangely soothing. It was a dog's growl, yes, but pitched differently, a vibration that seemed to cut through the fiery haze in Bobcat's mind. The sound startled Bobcat. It was so unexpected, so completely alien to his current state of panicked resistance. It wasn't the sharp, fearful snarl of prey, nor the aggressive roar of a rival. It was different. He paused, his thrashing momentarily stilled, his head cocked just as slightly. The heat still raged, but for a fraction of a second, the strange rumble from the dog cut through the sensory overload, a temporary anchor in a chaotic sea of pain and fear. In that tiny window, that unexpected moment of bewildered calm, Emily moved. Swiftly, skillfully, the needle found its mark. A brief, familiar sting, and then a strange, cool sensation began to spread through his veins, countering the internal fire. The relief was not immediate, but it was a promise, a subtle shift in the relentless burning, a whisper of coolness against the inferno. He felt himself sag, exhaustion finally winning out over panic. The scent of antiseptic, the looming giants, the strange rumbling dog. It all blurred again, but this time, the blur was less terrifying. It was a descent, not into oblivion, but into something softer, a surrender to the strange, benevolent forces that surrounded him. He registered the gentle strokes of a human hand on his feverish head, the low, steady breathing of the dog beside the table. He was still in pain, still burning, but a thread of calm, fragile but present, had been woven into the fabric of his suffering. In that moment, a profound, almost unbelievable shift occurred within his wild heart. The dog, this strange, domesticated predator, had not just been present, he had intervened. And in that intervention, a new kind of trust, born from the very edge of life and death, began to bloom, a silent, powerful bond between two utterly different creatures. Weeks of struggle, a mending body, a bond that defied explanation, blossoming in the quiet space between a wild heart and a gentle one. For Bobcat, the world had slowly, painstakingly shifted from a place of sharp edges and blinding pain to one of soft blankets and the steady thrum of a canine's breath. The initial blur of strange smells and even stranger sensations had given way to a routine. The large, soft hands of the giant Emily were no longer purely terrifying. They still brought the sting of the needle sometimes, a sharp, momentary discomfort that made Bobcat flinch. But it was always followed by the warmth of a fresh blanket, a bowl of water that tasted clean and pure. Unlike the muddy puddles he'd once licked, his leg, once a searing agony that made every movement a torment, now felt different, dull, sometimes itchy, a strange sensation that made him want to lick at the wraps. But the giant always stopped him, gently but firmly. He learned to tolerate her presence, even if he still kept his body coiled, ready to spring when she entered his den. Her voice, soft and murmuring, was no longer a harbinger of fear, but merely background noise, a part of the new, strange world. But it was Rex, the large, golden creature, that truly held the key to Bobcat's uneasy peace. Rex, whose massive, gentle head would appear at the enclosure's mesh, whose soft huffs and low woofs were not threats but invitations. Rex, who lay patiently outside for hours, a golden sentinel simply being. In the wild, solitude was survival. Company meant competition, or worse, a predator. Yet Rex was neither. He offered only a steady, reassuring presence. One afternoon, as the giant Emily moved quietly around the room, replenishing the water bowl, Bobcat had been lying with his back to her, watching Rex. Rex was, as usual, stretched out, eyes half closed, a soft snore rumbling from his chest. Bobcat felt a strange loosening in his own chest, a warmth spreading from his core. He hadn't known such a feeling since he was a tiny, helpless kid, curled against his mother's flank. A sound escaped him, a low, rumbling vibration that started deep in his chest and resonated through his entire body. It was unfamiliar, yet undeniably comforting. A purr. He hadn't purred in years, perhaps never, not truly, not like this. Emily froze. Bobcat felt her gaze sharp and assessing, but he didn't flinch. He continued to purr, the sound a soft engine in his chest, directed inexplicably towards the sleeping golden dog. The human made a soft, surprised sound, a little gasp, but she didn't approach. She simply watched. It was then, in that moment of fragile, vocalized peace, that Bobcat understood. His physical wounds were mending, the dull ache in his leg a constant reminder of how far he'd come. But his emotional healing, the deep, ragged tears in his wild heart, had only truly begun with the unwavering, silent companionship of Rex, the golden giant who had offered not judgment, but simply presence. The click of the latch was a sound Bobcat knew well, but this time it felt different. Not the jarring clang of a trap closing, nor the muted thud of a cage door securing after yet another journey through the terrifying world of giants. This time, it was a release. The cool air, tinged with the scent of damp earth and distant pine, drifted in, carrying promises it barely dared to believe. A new world, vast and green, stretched beyond the familiar metal bars. Could a wild heart, so long accustomed to the ache of fear and the burn of mistrust, truly find peace in a garden? Dr. Emily, a giant whose touch had slowly morphed from terrifying restraint to comforting caress, stood back, her movements slow and deliberate. Bobcat felt the vibration of her steps through the ground, a rhythm it now recognized as benign. The metallic tang of antiseptic, a constant companion during the long days of its mending, was gradually fading, replaced by the vibrant symphony of nature. Each breath was a revelation, the sharp metallic tang of rain-soaked leaves, the faint sweet perfume of unseen blossoms, the musky scent of damp soil. The enclosure itself was a marvel, a sprawling, semi-wild haven nestled within the very heart of the giant's territory. It held ancient oaks with gnarled branches, perfect for climbing, dense thickets of berry bushes offering both cover and potential sustenance, and even a bubbling stream, its water clear and inviting. Initially, Bobcat remained a creature of shadow and instinct. Its paws, once bruised and tender, now gripped the earth with newfound strength, each step a silent assertion of its regained prowess. It moved low, belly almost brushing the dew-kissed grass, a ghost in its own nascent paradise. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of an unseen bird was a potential threat, triggering an automatic crouch, a flattening of ears, a tightening of muscles. The memory of hunger, of the searing pain of a trapped limb, of the terrifying faceless giants who had once meant only harm, still lingered, a faint, persistent echo in its wild brain. But then there was Rex. Rex the dog, the other giant, but a different kind of giant entirely. One whose presence was a silent reassurance, a warm, steady anchor in a sea of new sensations. He didn't chase, didn't bark, didn't demand. He simply was. He would lie patiently under the sprawling canopy of an ancient oak, his golden fur a beacon of stillness, his breathing a slow, rhythmic lullaby. Bobcat would watch him from the safety of a shadowy thicket, eyes narrowed, muscles coiled, ready to flee. But Rex never moved, never threatened. He simply existed, a quiet companion in this strange new world. Slowly, cautiously, Bobcat began to draw closer. The scent of him, a comforting mix of earth and sun, and something uniquely dog, became less alarming, more familiar. One afternoon, a particularly bold squirrel darted across an open patch of grass, its bushy tail a blur of nervous energy. Bobcat's predatory instincts flared, a forgotten thrill igniting within its chest. It tensed, muscles coiling, ready to spring. But just as it prepared to launch, Rex shifted, a soft sigh escaping his lips. Not a warning, not a threat, but a gentle reminder of shared space. Bobcat paused, the squirrel forgotten, its attention drawn to the dog. Rex wasn't even looking at it, just stretching, a picture of tranquil contentment. The moment passed, the squirrel scampered away, and Bobcat felt a strange loosening in its chest. It wasn't a territory to be fiercely defended, but a sanctuary to be shared. They began to build a new life, together, under the sheltering branches of that ancient oak. Bobcat would sometimes climb to a lower branch, its claws digging lightly into the rough bark, and watch Rex doze or chew thoughtfully on a stick. It was a silent understanding, a bridge forming between two vastly different creatures. The pain in its flank, a searing memory of its past, was now a dull ache, a ghost of what it had been. The hunger that had once driven it to desperation was replaced by regular, nourishing meals laid out by the giants, but always consumed under the watchful, comforting gaze of Rex. The sting of the needle, once terrifying, was a distant memory, replaced by the soft warmth of a blanket, the sweet taste of clean water after days of parched thirst. The giants, once monstrous, were now sources of comfort, their large hands offering gentle strokes that eventually soothed more than they startled. This was freedom, Bobcat realized, not just from the cage, but from the fear. It was the freedom to explore, to hunt, though its meals were always provided, to simply be wild within the embrace of gentle care. Rex was always there, a steady golden presence. Sometimes Bobcat would even let its guard down enough to rest near him, the warmth of his body a comforting anchor. It was a tentative exploration, a new phase of healing, in a quiet, profound coexistence. The ancient oak, a silent witness, spread its branches wide, as if blessing this unlikely, beautiful bond. The world had once been a vast, terrifying expanse of hunger and sharp edges where every rustle of leaves could mean either prey or predator. Now it was soft. Bobcat, the wildcat, knew the soft ground of the enclosure, the soft touch of the giant's hands, and the impossibly soft fur of the large lumbering creature he'd come to know as Rex. The giant canine, Rex the golden retriever, was an enigma. He smelled of comfort and a strange, unthreatening bigness. At first, Bobcat had hissed, a low, guttural warning from deep within his chest, every instinct screaming, "Threat!" But Rex had simply lowered his massive head, a rumbling sound emanating from his chest that wasn't a growl, but something else. A soft, rumbling vibration that eventually Bobcat recognized as a sound of peace. Their interactions had started cautiously. Bobcat circling, eyes narrowed, Rex simply laying still, occasionally thumping his tail against the floor. Then one day, Rex had offered his nose a wet, inquisitive sniff. Bobcat, surprising even himself, had reciprocated, a light touch of his own sensitive nose against the dog's, tasting the strange, earthy scent. And then, the head rubs. Bobcat would initiate them, a slow, deliberate approach, his rough tongue a quick, tentative lick against Rex's fur before he'd press his head hard into the dog's side or shoulder. Rex would lean into it, a contented sigh escaping him, and sometimes he would even offer a gentle, open-mouthed lick to Bobcat's head, a gesture Bobcat had learned was not a threat, but a sign of affection. Play had followed, a series of mock pounces from Bobcat, low to the ground, ears back, then a swift spring onto Rex's back, claws sheathed, a playful bat at his ears. Rex, for his part, would respond us with playful lunges, his large paws surprisingly gentle, mouthing at Bobcat's neck with utmost care. It was a language understood without words, a bond forged in shared space, and an uncanny understanding that transcended their species. The ultimate comfort Bobcat had discovered was to sleep beside Rex the golden retriever. It began tentatively, a cautious approach to the warm, soft mound of fur that was Rex, then a slow, careful curl-up at his flank. Rex would shift, a low rumble in his chest, and Bobcat would tense, ready to spring away. But the rumble was always followed by a settling, a gentle warmth, and sometimes a large paw would subtly shift, creating a protective barrier. Bobcat, the wildcat, who had once known only the cold ground and the constant vigilance of the wild, now knew the deep, unwavering warmth of shared slumber. His dreams, once filled with the terror of pursuit and the gnawing ache of hunger, were now filled with the gentle rise and fall of Rex's breathing, the comforting scent of his fur, and the overwhelming sense of safety. Dr. Emily, the giant who moved with such purpose, often watched them, her eyes crinkling at the corners, in a way Bobcat had come to associate with kindness. She was the one who provided the food, the clean water, the soft blankets, and the careful touches that healed. Her hands, once a source of the stinging prick of a needle, a brief pain followed by an immense relief from the aches that had plagued his body, were now synonymous with gentle strokes and reassuring murmurs. She had healed his wounds, the gashes and scrapes from his life before, and had helped him forget the gnawing emptiness of his stomach, the playful pounces, the shared slumber, the quiet moments of companionship. These were the fabric of Bobcat's new world. He didn't understand the why of it, only the what. What was comfort? What was safety? What was the strange, deep connection he felt with Rex the golden retriever? It was a bond that had blossomed from fear into something akin to familial love, a feeling Bobcat had never known in the brutal wild. Rex had become his anchor, his mirror, his silent confidant. Their interactions were a complex dance of instinct and learned trust, a testament to the unexpected depths of interspecies affection. But a tremor, a shift in the air signaled a change. Dr. Emily, the kind giant, had started spending more time watching them, her brow often furrowed, her whispers to other giants carrying a note of something Bobcat couldn't quite decipher, but which made the fur on his neck prickle slightly. He knew the shifts in her scent, the subtle changes in her demeanor. This was different. A new scent had entered their shared space, a faint metallic odor that came from the strange, square device Dr. Emily held. He could hear words like sanctuary and wild, words that, even in his limited understanding, sparked a deep-seated unease. He instinctively knew what wild meant: hunger, cold, fear, and solitude. His current life was none of those things. It was warm, full, safe, and shared with Rex, the golden retriever. The thought of losing this, of returning to the harsh, unforgiving world he had barely survived, sent a shiver through his sleek body. The invisible tension in the air grew heavier. Bobcat would look at Rex, the golden retriever, then at Dr. Emily, a silent question in his golden eyes. He would rub against Rex, his familiar headbutt a plea for reassurance, then turn to watch Dr. Emily's face, searching for answers in her expression. The looming ethical dilemma, though incomprehensible to him in human terms, manifested as a primal fear of disruption. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to be separated from the warmth of Rex's fur, the gentle touch of Dr. Emily's hands, or the safety of this strange but loving home. He was a wildcat, yes, but he had found a new kind of wild, one bounded by affection and trust, a wildness that had room for a giant golden dog and the compassionate giantess who cared for them both. The thought of this beautiful, intricate world unraveling was a deeper fear than any he had faced in his previous, brutal life. The air hung heavy, thick with a scent Bobcat remembered. It wasn't the metallic tang of fear, nor the sharp, acrid sting of panic. It was a softer smell, a human sadness that mirrored the ache in his own chest, an ache he hadn't known he could feel. He watched the big human, Emily, her shoulders slumped, her usually steady hands trembling as they stroked his ears. His fur, once ragged and matted with forest debris and dried blood, was now sleek and soft, a testament to her endless, gentle brushes. He'd learned to lean into her touch, to purr a deep, rumbling sound that used to feel alien. Now it was a comfort. A whine, soft and mournful, rippled through the room. Rex, the big, shaggy dog whose presence had once been an irritant, a loud, clumsy interruption to his solitude, now felt like an anchor. Rex had changed too. The constant nervous energy that used to make Bobcat's hackles rise had softened. The dog's eyes, usually bright with boisterous play, were clouded with the same human sadness that filled the room. Bobcat pushed harder against Emily's leg, a small protest, an instinctual plea against the unspoken truth hanging in the air. He nudged her hand, then turned, meeting Rex's gaze. A silent agreement passed between them, a shared understanding of a bond forged in shared fear and eventual, unexpected comfort. The dog whined again, a deep, guttural sound, and then nuzzled Bobcat's flank. It was a goodbye, Bobcat knew, even if the human hadn't articulated it with her strange, complex sounds. He rubbed his head against Rex's neck, a rare, intimate gesture, then turned back to Emily, his whole being focused on her, trying to absorb her scent, her touch for as long as he could. The travel carrier, a cold, hard box that once represented pure terror, now felt different. He remembered the first time, the jarring movements, the metallic smell, the terrifying unknown. Now, as Emily gently guided him inside, her voice a low, soothing murmur, it was still unfamiliar, but the primal fear was muted. He could feel the warmth of the blanket she had placed inside, could smell her lingering scent on it. He settled, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of his own breathing, his large eyes peering through the mesh. The world outside, the world of trees and shadows and rustling leaves beckoned, but this small, contained space, for all its limitations, represented a journey back to that world, a journey enabled by these giants who had slowly, patiently earned his trust. He didn't see Rex in the immediate aftermath of his departure, but he felt the absence, a hollow space where the dog's large, comforting presence used to be. Rex, too, felt the quiet descend upon the house, a silence deeper than any he had known before. The playful nudges, the shared naps and sunbeams, the occasional wary wrestling matches, all gone. He wandered, head low, sniffing at Bobcat's favorite spots, a melancholic quest for a scent that was fading. But Emily was there. Emily, who understood the quiet ache, who offered soft words and even softer strokes. She started bringing home new animals, small trembling creatures who smelled of fear and abandonment. A tiny squirrel with a bandaged leg, a wide-eyed owl with a broken wing. Rex, for the first time, found a new purpose beyond grieving. He would lie near their kennels, a silent, watchful guardian, his quiet presence a balm to their frayed nerves. He understood the confusion, the fear in their eyes. He remembered it. He became a quiet mentor, a silent testament to the power of gentle care. The fearful trembles of the new arrivals would lessen under his watchful gaze. He knew when to approach slowly, when to keep his distance. He knew the softest whines, the most subtle movements that signaled distress. Emily watched him, a slow smile blooming on her face, seeing the transformation. The dog who had once cowered from loud noises, who had struggled with a deep, inexplicable sadness, was now a pillar of strength, a source of unwavering calm for the most vulnerable. Bobcat was gone, yes, but in his leaving, he had left behind a legacy, a changed heart in a big, shaggy dog. Rex understood, in his simple, profound way, that letting go wasn't an ending, but sometimes a new beginning. Years later, a new family moved into the old house, the scent of fresh paint and unfamiliar laughter, replacing the familiar echoes of a life once lived there. But could a wild heart truly forget its unlikely saviors, the giants who had offered solace when the world had been a blur of pain and terror? The memory of those hands, that soft fur, the quiet understanding, it lingered, a faint echo in the vast wilderness of instinct. The 2 years had passed since the terrifying ordeal in the drainage pipe, since the crushing weight of pain had given way to the bewildering world of the giants. 2 years since the soft nose and warm breath of the larger, clumsier giant had been a strange comfort in the small, confining spaces. Dr. Emily, the tall giant with the gentle hands, received the news through a static-laced phone call. The bobcat, him, was thriving. Not just thriving, but flourishing. There were kittens, small, wobbly, wild things, reflecting the untamed spirit that had always burned in his golden eyes. They were at the expansive sanctuary miles away, a place where the air smelled of pine and damp earth, not the sharp, clean tang of the clinic. The journey to the sanctuary was long, the rumble of the metal box on wheels a familiar, though now less frightening, sensation. Rex, the big golden giant with the perpetually wagging tail, rode beside her, his breath warm against her arm, a reassuring weight. The air grew crisp, the trees taller, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers towards a sky that seemed endless. The scents here were different, a symphony of wildness, pine needles, damp earth, the musky hint of deer, and the sharp, clean scent of rain on rock. It filled his lungs, a different kind of freedom than the enclosed but safe clinic. They parked near a fence, higher and more extensive than any he had ever seen, yet it seemed to blend into the landscape. This was a place of true wildness, where the wind carried the scent of other bobcats, unseen but present. He stretched, his muscles rippling under his sleek, tawny fur. The old stiffness in his leg was long gone, replaced by a powerful, agile grace. The faint scar beneath his left eye, a relic from a forgotten skirmish, was a testament to survival, not suffering. His golden eyes, once clouded with fear and pain, were now sharp, alert, and wholly wild. Dr. Emily pointed, her voice a soft murmur that didn't startle the small birds flitting between the branches. And there he was. Not the cowering, injured creature, but a silhouette of untamed grace. He was perched on a moss-covered boulder, high above the ground, his tawny coat dappled by the shifting shadows of the leaves. Beside him, nestled close, were 2 tiny bundles of fur, no bigger than her fist, their eyes still blue and unfocused. Kittens. Not kittens. He looked down, his gaze sweeping over them, over Rex, over the metal box that brought them. There was no fear, no immediate desire to flee, only a steady, unwavering observation. The memory was faint, a whisper on the wind, but it was there. The scent of them, the tall one and the shaggy one, was etched into the primal memory of comfort, of pain fading, of hunger being sated. He remembered the soft murmurs, the gentle hands that had not sought to harm, but to heal. He remembered the sting of the needle, then the profound relief, the heavy drowsiness that had taken away the gnawing ache. He remembered the taste of fresh water, clean and cool after days of thirst, and the soft, shredded meat that had slowly brought back strength. The humans had been giants then, terrifying in their initial approach, but slowly, inexorably, they had become sources of comfort. Their large hands surprisingly delicate, their voices soothing. He didn't approach. His wild heart demanded distance, the untamed instinct to protect his young, overriding any lingering familiarity. But as his golden eyes met Emily's and then Rex's, there was a flicker, a momentary softening. It was a recognition, deep and unspoken, a silent acknowledgement of a past shared, of a bond forged in pain and healing. He was a creature of the wild now, fully integrated into the ancient rhythm of predator and prey, but a part of him remembered. Rex let out a soft bark, a quiet, almost mournful sound that carried on the breeze. It was not a demand nor a challenge, but a blessing, a recognition of the wildness in the smaller creature, and an acceptance of the distance that now separated them. It was a gesture of profound love, of letting go, understanding that true love sometimes meant giving freedom, even when it hurt. The large dog's own fur, well-groomed and golden, contrasted sharply with the wild, untamed coat of the bobcat. His own journey from the confines of a kennel to the comfort of a home had taught him about the kindness of giants. The bobcat dipped his head, a barely perceptible movement, then turned, melting into the shadows of the forest with his tiny charges. He was home. He was wild. He was free. But the echo of that unlikely friendship, of the bond between a fierce wildcat and a gentle domestic giant, would forever resonate. It was a testament to rescue, to the arduous journey of rehabilitation, and to the enduring, unspoken power of love that could transcend species, distance, and even the call of the wild. Emily watched him go, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The success stories, these quiet triumphs, were why she did what she did. And as she turned to Rex, stroking his soft fur, she knew their hearts were forever linked to that fleeting, golden-eyed recognition. If this story touched your heart, comment 1 if you're moved or 0 if you're speechless. Thanks for watching until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more magical stories. See you next time.